Stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible.
All right, I will take a roll call. Tom Graham.
Here.
Amy Melky.
Here.
Michael Behrman.
Here.
Kathy Macho.
Here.
And Wendy Reed is gone, but I believe she will be here via Zoom. We do have a quorum.
Any citizen comments? Things that are not on the agenda, the time to speak up. Yes, you're right.
Rick Tarczynski, 465 State Street. I want to thank everybody for sending in all those letters to the mayor and Victor about Bill being the chairman of the planning commission. And I'd like to back that up, that he's done a very good job. I'd also like to thank all the people that wrote in telling us about other areas and how they do conflict of interest. It's very interesting to read and very nice, but those aren't the rules we play by. So I think they should stop trying to persecute Bill for something that's not in our books. So let's keep it down and let's not distract from what we're really talking about. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah. Yes.
Hi, Karen Upfield, Birchwood. I brought it up at the planning commission last week, and I wanted to bring it up again in front of you all about our Zoom and the ability for people outside of town to join us in this collaboration, I guess, of information. And so I went back and forth and saw about 5 or 6 emails. And there were some good ideas thrown around, and Victor said at the very end that if city council warranted a review or a change, that we would be able to look into it. We had offered, as We Love Harbor Springs, to even do a donation where we could have a camera that follows everyone's faces. And so we just thought that it would be better to try to include everyone and make the idea of participation easier. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, we do have on Zoom, we have a hand raised. Allison Larson.
Hi, thank you. About 6 to 8 years ago, the sidewalks on East Bluff were damaged when the road was replaced. We were told about 5 years ago they were slated to be repaired. This still has yet to happen. At last week's city council meeting, Victor said no sidewalks in the city would be repaired this year, although there is $40,000 budgeted. Victor, the one task you excel at is coming up with ways to waste taxpayers' time and money with new projects around town. Cutting down the beautiful white pine trees coming into town, moving the power station, junking up Shea Park with unneeded features, wasting $650,000 to redo State Road, paying $10,000 a year to Housing North, multiple lawsuits. I could go on and on. How about before any new project is started, the city cleans up the existing mess it has made? I am asking council to repair and maintain the city's existing infrastructure before taking on any new projects. The unrepaired sidewalks are another potential lawsuit for the city when someone falls and is injured. How can we have a walkable city without safe sidewalks? Thank you.
Thank you, Alton. Any comments? On the budget?
Okay. We will do two presentations before we open up the meeting to the public hearing for the budget. We'll do a brief presentation on the proposed 2025 budget as well as the amended 2024 budget. And then we'll do a presentation on the capital improvements plan. And then, Mr. Mayor, we could open it up to a public hearing on the budget. Then the council can have a discussion on both budget and the CIP, if that works well for you guys. All right, so when it comes to budgeting, so we have three main goals. So this is kind of our overview, so you guys understand, you know, what our purpose here is to budget. First is to cover the costs of government services and operations. The second is to maintain and replenish our fund balances, which covers services and operations in case there's unexpected losses in revenue or in emergency situations. And then the third one is to replenish our reserve funds and to work on capital infrastructure projects, which are broken down generally into those projects that we deem as necessary and those projects that are deemed desirable. And different projects come from different funds. Very few projects on our capital improvements plan comes from the general fund. We have streets, we have electric, we have water, sewer. So we have rates that fund some projects and we have millages that fund some other projects. So they're not all funded the same.
We're not doing the mini sidewalks because you're saving up for West Hill, is that correct?
Yeah, and that's, I'll get to that in a little bit, yep, in the presentation. And we will be doing some sidewalks this year, but we're not gonna spend the whole $33,000 or so that we would be normally spend the 10% of the budget. So I'll get into that. Generally from year to year, we do see minor fluctuations in budgeting. Yes, this can reflect, you know, inflationary increases, revenue projections for licenses and permits. These aren't always accurate. For example, you know, it's hard to predict how many site plans we're going to get or zoning permits going to get in a year. So our number for planning and zoning fees might be lower or higher based on how many actual applications we receive. So our revenues and our projections for expenditures, they fluctuate year, but we try to budget on trends and any expected projects that we have to do. So that's really how the budget works. And Nick can tell you, Mr. Whitaker, that we do tends to budget conservatively, so that we budget higher for expenses and slightly lower for revenue. That is just to give ourselves a buffer in case there's we end up lower with revenue and higher expenses. Our projected revenues and expenses are expected to be generally in line with 2024's. But in 2024 for general fund, we saw higher overall revenue. That's because we had over $500,000 donation grant for the Kiwanis project. So that means in 2025, we'll see a higher expenditure when we spend that money, if we do spend it in the fall of 2025 for the Kiwanis project. The major revenue changes, and when I say major, I'm looking at $10,000 or more difference between, $100,000 more between the 2024 to 2025. We're expecting $250,000 less in revenue. The noteworthy increases are $150,000 in operating millage and $105,000 more for fire protection fees. The noteworthy decrease is $500,000 for donations. So we're not expecting another $500,000 donations, but we do have potential projects that we're asking residents for money for, that's the bike path, and that is potentially the boardwalk. So we could see, money coming in for those projects as well as other projects. But on the safe side, we're gonna assume we're not gonna get $500,000 in revenues from the donation. So that's why we are expecting 250,000 less in revenue for 2025. All right, so here's a little breakdown of the revenue sources. As you can tell, about half of our general fund revenue for 2025 will be coming from our operating millage. About 9% is going to come from the public safety millage. Administrative fees are a little over 11%, and administrative fees, as a reminder, those are fees that we charge to other funds, such as the water sewer fund, the waterfront fund, electric fund, in order for staff time and other resources to help manage those funds. So we transfer in we're expecting to transfer in about $475,000 from other funds to cover administrative costs for administering those funds. Electric transferring, this is something that the city has been doing for decades now, is transferring in money from the electric fund into the general fund as kind of like a return on investment from when our electric system first went in place. It really helps prop up our general fund, but with, as you see, as part of the consequence of that is that $200,000 less every year in our electric fund to save for electric projects. While Nick, it's a valid counting practice, but it's one of those things where that money could be used for electric fund purposes, but it's been something we've been doing for decades, and we take that revenue out, it'll leave a kind of a, as you can tell, about 6% shortfall in revenue for the general fund. So something we keep on doing. Then other smaller fees, interest has actually gone up this year at 3.6%. It was probably in previous years about 1%, 1.5% of the budget. Now we've moved around money in different accounts, and we've significantly increased our revenue from interest. And then you see those tax and tax collection fees are pretty standard. They move around a little bit from year to year, but those are small but generally reliable revenue sources. You look at our expenditures, and this is for 2025. The numbers are, we see at police is about 1/4 this year, and the numbers are slightly skewed in this with higher parks percentage for 2025, and that's because of $500,000 expected expenditure for Kiwanis Park, spending that money for Kiwanis Park that we received from the donation. Normally, police is usually around 30% or a little bit higher of our general fund budget. I lump in clerk, treasurer, and accounting. Those are three departments that city clerk Nick Whitaker oversees, and we do have staff. We do have a deputy treasurer, deputy clerk, and other staff in that role. So it's not just one person, but those are what he's in charge of there. Legal, city manager are 2% and 4% respectively. Planning, zoning, assessing about 5%. Fire is 9%, and the way the fire works, as you know, it's an expenditure, but we also get reimbursed from the townships for their portion of their fire costs.
Victor, is it appropriate to ask a quick question right now? I think it is important to note that those expenditures in parks are going to be quite higher because of the donation that came in. That's a dedicated, restricted donation for the purpose of renovating the Kiwanis Park building. In a normal given year, just an estimate, I don't mean to push you on the spot, but if you took that $500,000 expenditure away, what would the percentage of parks expenditure be roughly?
I'm gonna guess probably about 16 to 17%.
Okay, and then all the other pieces of the pie would obviously increase in the percentage.
Yes, and I would.
It's
Sure.
fun like that,
Yeah.
or a pie chart like that would work, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
I would, like I said, I think these would probably be closer to 30%. And then others would also, you know, potentially go up,
corresponding,
yeah,
like
0.5%, 10%.
go up and make up that point.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just explain some of the major changes in expenditures. The fire department, as mentioned, well, I didn't mention this yet, but the fire department is expected to be $100,000 more in 2025 than 2024 because the fire authority has decided to hire or try to hire a full-time firefighter. Again, those $100,000 is not the city's cost, but the way the funds work, we have to show it as an expenditure and then we get reimbursed from the townships for their portion of the cost. So Nick, in reality, we're talking about maybe $15,000-$20,000 from the city.
25.
25.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got about 1/4 of the cost. Really, it's a $25,000 expenditure when you take in the revenue. Again, Kiwanis Park, $500,000 donation. Elections, even though it's not a huge number, it's gonna be drastically lower in 2025 than 2024 because in 2024, we had 4 elections. We may have 1 or 2 in 2025, and they're not gonna be as big of elections to administer. So the cost will be, you know, much smaller. So over the trends looking over the years, show the surplus and deficit in the general fund. You see that in 2018, 2019, we had a pretty significant dip in our deficit, and a lot of that had to do with the spillway that we put in place here in front of City Hall. We got back up to a surplus, and then the 2024 and 2025 are also a little skewed because those reflect the donations, again, for Kiwanis Park. And the other funds, we're not having significant increases or changes in operating, but the changes you do see in the budget are mostly reflected by capital projects or purchases. And we'll get into some of those in the CIP as well. If you're looking at revenues for 2024 for all funds, you'll see that electric fund is really high, $8 million, and that's because we're anticipating to get some of the bond money for the electric project.
That's 2024, or is that budgeted for
Sorry, that's
2025?
just it.
It is, so it's the budget
Yeah,
for
it's budget
2025. Thank you.
It's revenues for 2025. And that is because we were taking in the bond for the electric fund. Normally, that would be probably closer to $4 to $5 million. You think you put in $3 million bond for this 2025 the budget.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so general, and then the others again are generally in line with what we normally see. Except for general fund, which again is inflated by the Kiwanis Park project. Tax revenues, just to show you what our combined millage rate between 3 millages, the operating, public safety, and local streets is at 7.6 mils. Local streets and public safety, they're not at the same, even though they were both mills past 1 mil, each of those were for 1 mil. The heavy rollback has decreased them. So local streets was approved in 2017. So the rollback has decreased how much the mill rate that we collect for that. And that's why you see that at 12% versus the public safety, which was recently passed in 2022 for 1 mil. And this is a snapshot of our unrestricted cash balance in city funds. We have a policy in the general fund to try to keep 9 months of cash in hand in case there's an emergency. We established that policy in 2023 as a best practice, and as a percentage that should come out to 75%. So right now we're at 76.7%. So we have met that 9-month minimum. We don't have similar policies in other funds only because most of those other funds are so project heavy that, you know, we save up money for an expected purchase or an expected project, so that our funds get inflated, and then when we make that purchase, those funds go back down. It's good to be very cognizant though of how much cash we have on for our general operations fund. So we're looking at this, if we're looking at a 9-month minimum for all our funds, the only two that after 2025 that we would not meet that 75% for 9-month minimum is electric fund and the water and sewer fund. And again, those are both because of our anticipated projects. The water sewer is the State Street project, which will replace the water and sewer infrastructure on State Street, and the electric fund for the substation. And our waterfront fund cash balance, as a note, the Harbor Commission and the city has been saving up money and not doing as many big projects in anticipation to renovate and update the Harbor Master building. So we have $1.2 million, which is, over 200% of our 9-month minimum, and that's because they're hoping to save up money to do one of the Harbor Master project. That will go out to bid shortly in the winter time. So finally, the last thing from the council to think about when we get after the public hearing to talk about is, what council role is and what the city staff's role is in the budgeting process. So council's goal is really the policy goal is what services and amenities does council want to see? Do they want to increase any? Do they want to maintain what we have, or do they want to reduce or eliminate services or amenities projects? And then the next one is what kind of surplus deficit does council want to see? That also helps establish, our millage rate too at the same time. If you want to see cut services and cut things, then you can reduce the general operating budget. So then city manager, city clerk's role is to figure out how to implement those increases or reductions that you want to see. Then we advise council on the feasibility of finding funds for projects or the consequences of delaying certain projects. Obviously, delaying projects that city views as necessary will have serious consequences in the staff side opposed to a desirous project or desirable project like a parks project. So that's something to think about, that when we get to the CIP, capital improvements plan discussion, we rank our projects based on how needed they are. So, and finally, we also will reduce to meet council's goals, advise council on how surplus deficit will impact our financial position. And that's really where we come in after you set the policy for us, and we come back and advise you on how to go about achieving that policy. So that is my presentation for the budget. I will move on to the capital improvements plan. It'll be just as short or as long if you're not into budgets. All right, 2025, 2030 CIP budget. Just as a quick recap, if you were at the planning commission, you would have seen this presentation. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. For the planning commission, it was really important for them to see how our projects align with the master plan goals. But we don't need to get into details for every single project here for what goals they align with. But it's in the presentation that you guys probably have looked at and can look at again before next Monday's meeting. So our CIP is a 6-year plan for capital projects. We include projects that are over $10,000, projects or purchases. There's no requirement on what that number should be per state law, but it's a pretty good threshold because $10,000 is a threshold that we need to seek council approval for purchases. So that's why we do that. Again, it includes both necessary projects and desirable projects. It does not commit the city to spending any money whatsoever. It's a planning tool. It's helping us understand what money we may need to or may want to spend on certain projects. And the budget is what really sets how we're going to spend the money. This is just giving you an idea of where our money might go and when. It is a requirement by state law. The Michigan Planning and Enabling Act requires us to have a capital improvements plan. It focuses mostly on projects that are structures, but we also include purchases such as vehicles like our snowplow or police vehicles. So we have a better understanding of where we're going to be with the budget in the future. Both the planning commission and city council must approve it. And as I said, it kind of allows us to plan for future projects and helps us with the timeline of when and how to use that. The process, in September, early fall, late summer, early fall, our department heads will submit projects to the city manager. And these projects are either new projects or projects from the past that we haven't gotten to yet. And they'll include costs, timeline, how necessary they are, and how they're going to be funded. To compile that information and distribute to our policy team, which includes a mix of staff, the mayor, planning commission chair. And then in late October, November, policy team reviews it and scores it, compile that into the draft CIP, take it to the planning commission for review and approval, and then take it to the city council for review. We're looking at total projects for this next upcoming 6 years at 75, with a total cost of $23.82 million. Average cost per project purchase is $317,000. Now that's an average, it's not the mode or the median, but and that number is kind of skewed on the higher end due to the cost of the substation project. And for at least 9 projects, we have noted that we would hope to receive either donations or grants for those projects, and most of them are. So I mentioned the electric fund really is our big ticket item. About the electric fund constitutes over half of the overall anticipated spending in the next 6 years. And I do want to remind council that these capital improvement projects purchases on this CIP plan are not for small item purchases. Like if we need to buy an equipment at the DPW that costs $4,000, that's not in this plan. It's just the high ticket items. So we're not looking at all capital purchases, but we're looking at the high end. So these are how our projects are split between the different funds. And as I mentioned, there are 75 projects, but on this chart you see 87 because some projects are split between funds. So the cost for State Street project, for example, that is split between the streets, water, sewer, and electric. So you'll see that project in 3 different funds. We have over 30 projects anticipated in electric fund and electric system. Streets have quite a few projects, and then next comes our equipment fund. When our equipment fund is for essentially our vehicles and our equipment that our DPW uses and our police. Those are purchases, and how that works in our equipment fund, as a reminder, is whenever the street department goes out and plows the streets, we charge, the equipment fund charges the streets a rate based on the state's established rate and how much it costs for us to rent out that plow from the equipment fund. So we make the purchase with the equipment fund, and then our other funds pay back that equipment fund for the usage it used of that piece of equipment. And some of the funds, the waterfront fund and the DDA fund only have a few expenditures, projects planned for the next 6 years. And by few, I mean a few large scale projects. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the electric fund, it constitutes over half the spending in our overall CIP plan. We have over $12 million expected in the electric fund in the next 6 years. Over half of that is related to the substation, 46 kV line rebuild associated with the substation. This is just a way to look at it from a percentage, and just again shows you the electric fund is quite large, and some of the other funds like DDA, waterfront are smaller. And this line graph just kind of shows you where we anticipate our highest cost to be in the next 6 years. As you can see, 25 and 2026 are going to be the higher cost years. And again, that's mainly because of the electric fund, electric substation. And also, it is also skewed at the end as you go to 29, 28 to 2030, because we don't have as many known projects or projects that we know for sure are going to happen those years. As we get closer to the years that we get closer to those years, we'll have a better idea of how many projects, and we'll probably have more projects added to that list. So, so it's kind of skewed, but in 2 ways. One is from the substation causing a higher end for the next 2 years, and then 29, 2030, we're just not as sure this far out ahead of how many projects and how much they're going to cost. So looking at, two questions that we had from the council meeting or, about, our projects. One was to have DPW come up with a sidewalk plan, or at least relay the sidewalk plan to the city. As I mentioned, when I was talking to DPW Director Lucas Banerjee, one of the sidewalks received the most complaints for, and he has the most concern with, is a West Hill sidewalk going up M119 from, north of Third Street all the way up to State Street. But in order to do that project, it's probably gonna cost between $70,000 and $100,000 on the high end. So we need to save up some money to do that project. So he's requesting that instead of spending the whole 10% of our streets millage fund, so the way sidewalk repairs are earmarked is that we would spend 10% of our street millage revenue on sidewalks each year. So the street millage started out at $250,000 about when the millage went in effect. Now it's at about 330 or so, give or take. That's a projection. So we spend 10% of that, which would be $33,000 to $35,000, depending on how it comes in, on sidewalks. Lucas is requesting that we use in 2025, $5,000 to $10,000 on smaller repairs throughout the city, save up some of that money for a 2026 repair. Combine that with the $35,000 we'll get to do a repair of the West Hill sidewalks. And then if that project is much higher than $65,000 to $70,000, then we wouldn't be able to do as many sidewalks in 2027. We have to hold off. So of course, if you can earmark more money from the streets to do sidewalks, but then you're taking away from the actual street work, non-sidewalk street work. If you take more money from the street fund to spend on sidewalks. Same thing as you could use general fund money to apply that to sidewalks, but then you have to figure out where you want to take that money away from general fund. So you are capable of doing that at the city council. We had a question about the DDA monies for the boardwalk. The boardwalk is not within the DDA boundaries, so the DDA cannot spend money from TIF money on something that's not within their boundaries. So special, where the Spring Street sidewalk meets the boardwalk, that might be within the DDA boundaries, but essentially the rest of the boardwalk is not within the DDA boundaries. And the TIF money, on top of that, TIF money can only be used for projects that are in the development, the downtown development, which council approved, I think, last year. So the rest of the presentation is just as I mentioned, the goals aligned with how the projects align with the master plan goals. I won't get into that, but. Mr. Mayor, at this point, I would suggest going to the opening of a public hearing, having a council member make a motion for a public hearing for the budget, 2025 proposed budget and 2024 amended budget.
So moved.
Second that motion.
Jamie Melky,
Yes.
Kathy Macho,
Yes.
Michael Behrman,
Yes.
Tom Graham.
Yes.
Open to public comment for the 2024 and 2025 budgets at 7:34.
Everybody digested everything you said, right?
Yeah.
No questions because you already understand it all, right? Any questions for Victor? Anybody in the audience?
I think we do have one hand on Zoom. I think it's Garen. Garen, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks, Victor, for taking my question. Just two quick questions. You mentioned that 6.5% of the revenue came from other. Can you give us two examples of what that other is? And my second question is the new firefighter position new period? And if so, why are we going away from the volunteer position? Thanks.
Okay, I will take that first question. On my screen, you can see a list of all the revenues on the first page of the general fund budget, all the revenue line items. So Other revenues could be something as simple as district court fees, lease income fees, and that's something that we have, the lease income fee we have with currently Jervis Webb for the Daifuku building, the amount of income rent they pay to us. Adopt a Tree program, donations for trees, et cetera. So those are just some examples of other. Nick, if you want to take on the question, firefighter, because you go to the fire authority.
Yes, Garen, the fire authority had a recent meeting, and that's been talked about for several years now. That the volunteers are not, they're just not as many as there was 20 years ago, because people can't work and live here. So we've got people on our fire department driving from Melanson north of town. Well, when they're out working full-time jobs, we're not getting the response on these calls that we should be getting. And the reasoning behind talking about a full-time person during the day, the bulk of what happens during the day are false alarms. I mean, there's, sometimes dozens a day that has to bring a firefighter from across the county to respond to these calls. And then of late, we've had the point where the surrounding fire departments are responding quicker than our own crew. So the fire authority the fire department is kind of outgrown its total volunteer status to needing somebody there on a more full-time basis to take care of these local calls and a lot of administration.
Yes, Bob.
Off of Pepper Street. The other big problem with the volunteer fire. Oh, I'm sorry.
We want to see you, not just hear you.
Okay.
It's on.
It's our Nick.
Is it not?
Yeah.
Okay, the other big problem with the fire department is that the state has been relentless in their demand for criteria. It takes a person now 450 hours of study over a 9-month period. So that's 2 nights a week, generally at least 1, maybe 2 Saturdays. It's impossible. You just can't find young people that are willing or have the time to do that. They're raising families and working. We've argued with the state relentlessly over this for years, that they lower the qualifications. Harbor Springs firefighters are probably not going to be fighting any fires in oil refineries, but the state lives by the what if rule. The stated goal is to eliminate volunteer fire departments and replace them, and I'm going to say it, with union firefighters. There you have it. So until the state backs up, volunteer fire departments are pretty much doomed.
Anybody else? Thank you, Bob.
So, and there are no other comments. I don't see any others, I assume. So we need a motion to close the public hearing, right, Nick?
Correct.
I move to close the public hearing.
Wendy just raised
Oh,
Oh,
Well, Wendy, if you want to go, but go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
First of all, regarding the DDA and my suggestion to use funds from them for the boardwalk, the 2025 budget income is $428,000. $140,000 of that is property tax income. 46,000 of it is assessments from properties in the DDA. The TIF funds are only $32,000. And the DDA has already spent money on properties that are not in the downtown central business district. They put out a DDA directory that they specifically included businesses that were uptown. And they have already pointed out that their wayfinding includes businesses that are uptown. So they've already done it. And if you refer to the minutes in April 10th, 2024, they specifically talk about having done that. And then in the sidewalk plan from the DPW, the last planning commission meeting that they talked about this at, they were talking about narrowing State Street from Summit Street to M119. Well, I don't think anyone is in favor of doing that. And if you did not do that, you would have that much more money to put forward to the sidewalks. And then lastly, that capital improvement plan, because in my reading of it today, it looks like the policy team is Mayor Graham, whoever the planning commission chair ends up to be, the city clerk treasurer, the city manager, and the DPW administrator. All of you have the same power of vote. Tom is the only elected official who sits on this committee who is representing the city citizens, and he only has 20% of the vote. He is outvoted by his own employees. And so something is really wrong with that. Michael, Kathy, Jamie, and I are powerless to do anything with this. We are just going to be the hamsters in the cage that are trying to figure out how to pay for what the five of you decide are your priorities for spending. That's just wrong. We should be rethinking that, and I don't know how that happened. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. I can answer a few of those questions. The first is property taxes. For the DDA, the TIF money actually coming in this year is actually 172,000. 32,000 is from the county, and 140 is from the city portion. So 172,000 is TIF that can't be spent on anything other than what's in the TIF plan, and about $180,000 is revenue from transfer from reserves, which again, most of those money in the reserves is TIF money in reserves. So the vast majority of the money that you see in the $428,000, probably over 300,000 or more is money from TIF money that can't be used on things outside the district. The policy team, the vote that the policy team has for the CIP is for scoring of the necessity of projects. There's no vote as to whether or not that project gets done or not. It's usually in most other communities, it's staff brings the projects to council and council votes on it. We have this extra layer of a combination of staff and policymakers to come and score the projects before they goes to the whole planning commission board for review, discussion, and then before it goes to the council for review and discussion. Council is more than willing to change the way we do that, but it's very similar to how we score projects for when we have bids coming in for projects. We have a project over $40,000. We have a policy where the DPW director, the city clerk, and myself, we review and score those projects to give a recommendation to council on which company to go with. However, council can go with whatever bid they want to go with for our policy. So, and then of course, the State Street project that was decided upon by the planning commission and council based on recommendation from staff. And if council wants to revisit whether or not to do that project, they're more than willing and capable of doing that. So I think
I would also like to respond to Councilmember Reeve. I don't sit at this table because I feel powerless. So please don't speak for me. I have a power of a vote. If the public doesn't like it, they can choose not to elect me or re-elect me. I represent constituents in the city's best interests. I was at a planning commission meeting where these things on the capital improvement plan were talked about. A huge majority of the CIP are utilities such as electrical and water and sewer. We owe it to our consumers to provide an infrastructure that's reliable, that's there on a demand, that can meet the growing load, that's based on the advice of professionals such as engineers, our water and sewer department professionals. That's far beyond my pay grade, and maybe you have other expertise that I don't know about, but I feel that I have a power of a vote here at the table, and I'm gonna exercise it for the best interest of the city and my constituents. Thank you.
So we do need, it probably would be best to close the public hearing if you want, the council wants to enter into the discussion about these.
Yes, I do have a motion by Michael Behrman, and I would need a second, and then I'll do a roll call, and that will close the public hearing when council then can discuss it amongst themselves.
I'll second.
Jamie Bunkie,
Yes.
Tom Graham,
Yes.
Michael Behrman,
Yes.
Kathy Macho.
Yes.
Public hearing closed at 7:46.
And as a reminder to council, we are not making a vote on, we're not holding a vote on the budget or the CIP today. This was have a discussion, a public hearing discussion, and then at December 16th meeting is when council will vote on adopting the budget and approving the capital.
Do we have the opportunity to ask some questions related to the CIP?
Absolutely. Lucas is here, and so is Becky, your DDA director. Nick's here, so.
Regarding the CIP projects for 2025, I just needed a refresher, and I thought maybe Lucas could answer. We are, the plan, as I understand it, is to do the State Street water and sewer from Summit to M119, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so would it make sense? I know it's a lot more than the sidewalk budget, but the sidewalk that then goes down State Street there, does it make sense to do that at the same time? I mean.
Lucas, Director, Department of Public Works. The issue that we would run into if we do both projects simultaneously would be detouring traffic efficiently, because we would have the entire west end of town blocked to traffic. Because that's part of the big expense of redoing that sidewalk, is this MDOT road. We'd have to detour that to do the sidewalk replacement. So we would have to close the road down while that work is being done. And closing M119 and State Street down completely would really put a damper on traffic on that side of town.
Oh, okay, so if I understand then, in order to do the state road piece up to Summit, you only need to close State Road. You don't need to close the Bluff State part of it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't clear on that.
Lucas, how many feet of sidewalk does 5,000 to 10,000 get you? Not to put you on the spot.
For a visual of that, the small section of sidewalk that we removed and replaced on Spring Street north of 3rd by the Burley building, that was about $16,000 to $17,000 for the sidewalk. So not very much.
And how Do you guys, your guys are out there, you're walking the sidewalks, and you make the determination of which to go after, how is that made, you know, with that amount to spend?
Part of the determination, we keep in contact with our liability insurance company, and the threshold for insurance liability on a sidewalk, a heave, or a trip hazard is actually 2 inches. I think it's safe to say we have 0 liability trip hazards in the city at this point. So on the liability side, we're in pretty good shape. Another thing that really is a test to the condition of the sidewalk is when we take the snow removal equipment, it has a straight metal edge along it, and if that catches something significantly or peels up sidewalk, we know right away. And that's one way we can determine the areas that need attention quicker than others. So, and that includes also visually walking the sidewalks and seeing them throughout the course of the year, and complaints from citizens or people that are using them.
Thank you.
Thank you, others.
Oh, one other quick question then. So on the sidewalk that one citizen mentioned that's on, I think it was East Bluff. I'm assuming that's on your radar and on your list of sidewalks that need to be looked at.
Oh yeah, on East Bluff, there is some crack in the sidewalk. It might not be appeasing to look at. I, however, was short on employees this past snow events that we had, and I was in the machine, and I could easily drive the snow blower in both directions on East Bluff in that area. Like I said, it's not the prettiest sidewalk, but it's not unsafe. It has some cracks and some small uneven portions of it, but it's not a liability at this point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Talk about the zoning code.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we have, I just have a couple more questions regarding the budget, Mr. Mayor. The new hire for, parks maintenance, where did those wages appear in the budget? Is it, spread out over the different parks? I was assuming maybe. I think we're making an assumption.
Yes, as well as other funds as well.
Yeah, if I could just touch on that, yes, a portion was put in parks and grounds, a portion was put in refuse collection for garbages and stuff. Money was put out of that into the DDA and move snow in the DDA district, as they had agreed upon when they hired this person. The streets, obviously, there's a little money put into the streets if he's doing sidewalks outside the DDA. So to pinpoint any given thing, I've got him spread out even a little bit in the waterfront fund or just emptying garbage cans.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And so speaking of DDA and snow removal, does that appear in the DDA's budget?
Yeah, on page 19.
Got it on screen right now.
Okay. I thought I looked and didn't see it, but
Well, it wouldn't put it, I didn't put his name in there.
no, but so that would be under
Wages, and
wages, so it wasn't under snow removal.
and that part-time is probably should be removed from there and lump them together. Wages, the 704 are generally our DPW guys, if they're doing anything. Wages part-time would be Becky Goodman, the director, who is part-time. And Nate, the new hire, just fell in under part-time because he is part-time for the DDA. So that 45 grand would include Becky and a portion of, and that's a new position. We don't know how much time will be actually involved in the DDA versus picking up garbage or cleaning restrooms, so we just gotta give it a year to figure out where he's spending most of his time to adjust it in years going forward.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I clarify for the public that might not, when Clerk Whitaker says it's a new position, it's a shifting of a position within the city. We did not rehire a DPW person and reorganize some of their tasks and responsibilities. So it's, the position is new, but it's not a new, we're not adding additional employees to the system.
Thank you for that clarification.
I have another just clarification on the CIP for 2025. The costs in here for the electric first two items, I'm assuming those are going to be financed by some kind of a bond. Okay, so that's not gonna be coming out of like one of the, that's okay, that'll be bonded.
Correct.
Is the state street sewer and water, are we thinking about bonding that? No.
No, we have enough
Okay.
money between the funds to do it, to still have about 25% left.
In
over
those
In
funds?
those funds, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so when you look at that CIP amount for that State Street project,
Mhm.
it will be broken out, water, sewer, streets, sidewalks. So the total has been put at an initial engineering's guess of how much. Once we get bids back, then it'll have to be adjusted, say, here's exactly what the sidewalks are gonna cost. Blacktop, curbs, water line versus sewer lines. So they're all in there though.
Okay, thank you.
There's been a lot of talk at the Parks Board about programs and activities and adding some more programs. Is it possible to put an additional line item somewhere so we know exactly what we're spending on programs
Absolutely.
instead of putting it
Now you're talking revenues or expenditures or both.
Both.
So say you have a project or a program, I don't know,
sledding and
You-
s'mores?
sledding and s'mores. So if I put in a line item at council's approval, somewhere in the general fund and the revenue saying programs and services, would it be acceptable to put all the projects in that one line item?
I think so.
And then in the parks and grounds, which would seem to me, which is on page and somewhere. Then I would put a line item in parks and grounds somewhere in the mix to that group of accounts, saying programs and services, and that would be the expense side of it.
Yes.
Yeah, so that, I think that's a good way of doing things. But it won't, if we do it that way, it won't, if you just lump all programs and programs under Parks and Grounds, it may not accurately reflect how much we're spending at Sled Hill, for example, for programs, we do the Sled Hill. So do you want,
Yeah, but it would be easy enough just to add one line item of programs and services under parks and grounds, general,
okay, yeah, for Sled Hill and the other parts.
skate park, whatever it may be. Yes, I could just put one in each one, Honest Park, beach, even. Yeah, absolutely. I can do that.
I don't have any more questions, Mr. Mayor. You?
You sound right, Michael.
No, I'd just like to make a comment, that a citizen made a comment that our city manager is wasting taxpayers' dollar and time and making it sound like just a lot of frivolous expenses, and absolutely people are entitled to their opinions, freedom of speech, etc. I also am entitled to push back a little bit. I don't think you're wasting taxpayers' money. First of all, we have a vote at the table. Secondly, the projects listed, what's going on in the city is incredible. We are investing in our infrastructure. That's long-term investment for our city. I disagree with that comment. The resident, citizen is entitled to their opinion. I thought it was mean-spirited. I'm entitled to mine as well. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if there are no other questions or discussion amongst council, we'll come back December 16th to approve the budget from the CIP.
Okay. About the zoning code?
Yes. Okay, so item C on the agenda is readoption of the zoning code. The zoning code was in effect prior to ordinance 439 that was repealed. So Attorney Jim Raymer prepared ordinance 440, which would officially readopt the old zoning code for the Michigan Zoning and Enabling Act standards or requirements. The Michigan Zoning and Enabling Act requires a public hearing to be held. The Planning Commission held a public hearing. And so this is to be absolutely safe, that there's no question whatsoever whether or not the ordinance code is in place. This would mitigate any potential legal risk when it comes to zoning. So to adopt an ordinance to put the code that was in place prior to ordinance 439 would leave no doubt whether or not code is in place. So what Planning Commission is recommending after they held their public hearing is to readopt the old zoning code. They also recommend that council withdraw the moratorium on the issue of zoning permits, which is set to expire, I believe, 12th. And they also did have discussion on wanting to have resolved to get a new zoning code in place soon, and hopefully by spring. But there's no firm date that they have recommended, but they want this Planning Commission and council to keep marching forward on the zoning code.
Did the planning commission recommend that the moratorium be ended immediately or just to let it expire?
I think they recommend to end it immediately.
Thank
Yep.
you. Okay.
We vote to end it, is it, it's ended immediately?
Yes, so we would have, after we open up the public discussion, two motions to make. One would be official adoption of ordinance 440, which puts the zoning code back in place, and then you would have a second motion would just be, the council moves to withdraw administrative ordinance 2024-2 or repeal it.
Just to terminate.
Yeah, to terminate administrative ordinance 2024-2, which was the moratorium.
How long before the new zoning is effective? Effective immediately or is there a waiting period?
The ordinance itself, under the ZEA does have a waiting period, and under our charter, which it elongates that by about 3 days. So it's a 10-day waiting period before the ordinance is effective. However, as I've indicated previously, it's the opinion of our opinion that the existing code was reaffirmed or ratified, if you will, by the virtue of the repeal of ordinance 439. So that that code, the old code, was revived. It's a technical term. So irrespective of the fact that ordinance number 440 may not take legal effect until 10 days after publication, the existing zoning code has been revived and is in place, irrespective of that.
It's worked for 50 years. It could work for another week or two, can it? Thank you, Jim. Any comment from the audience on that? No, take a motion to adopt the code.
Do we need one motion or two?
Two, one to approve ordinance 440, then separate, another one afterwards to terminate administrative ordinance 2024-2.
I move to accept the planning commission recommendation and adopt ordinance 440.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion?
I'll take a roll call. Kathy Macho,
Yes,
Tom Graham,
Yes.
Jamie Melky,
Yes.
Michael Behrman,
Yes.
motion carried.
And then we would need a motion to terminate administrative ordinance 2024-2, which is the moratorium on built permits.
I make a motion that we terminate the moratorium. As you just worded, thank you. Forgot the number on that, but
2024-2.
2024-2. I make a motion that we move to terminate the moratorium.
I'll second.
Tom Graham. Tom Graham,
Yes.
Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Michael Behrman,
Yes.
Kathy Macho,
Yes,
motion carried.
Okay, as a reminder, Mayor, next meeting is December 16th, and we will have under boards and commissions appointments to all our open seats for those boards and commissions. I will have the process. Each board and commission is slightly different in how you appoint members, so I'll have a policy and the process in the packet for next week. We will probably have quite a few things on that agenda because we don't meet again with a regular meeting until January 20th. So there'll be 5 weeks off between council meetings. Of course, if there's an urgent business, we will call a special meeting.
We don't meet on the 6th of January.
No, we usually never meet the first week of January, first week of April, first week of July, and first week of September. But council has ability next year to set the schedule going forward. So yeah, so there'll be quite a few things on the agenda. So it might be a longer meeting. We have just some, of course, there's budget, CIP, we have potentially looking at electric rates and water rates, some other issues. I think the closure of State Street for Street Music, that request is, we had asked the Chamber Foundation, Chamber to come back. And they're coming back December 16th. So there's a few other things that be on there as well.
And the boards and commissions. We don't have any, I don't know how many more applications we're gonna get. If that has to be done next week, could that be delayed until the first year?
The boards, the terms start January 1st, so it should happen on December 16th, so those terms aren't vacant. We have 19 open seats, and that could potentially cause business to delay unless the council wants to have a special meeting on January 1st or 2nd of that first week.
Anything else you want to add tonight?
No, we did, Chief Knight and I, we did do sergeant interviews. So in our police union agreement, there's a call for the position of sergeant. We haven't had a sergeant in years, so we are looking at internal candidates to promote to sergeant. We're not looking to add any new police officers, just internal promotion. So we have a sergeant, which will act as, you know, a step higher than patrol officers and kind of take a lot of the administrative burden off of Chief Knight. And so we did those interviews today. So if people try to get in touch with me today, I was from 8:30 to 5 doing interviews. It was fun. It was good, but it was tiring. So, but yeah, so hopefully by next week we'll have a sergeant on the police force. And I don't know when's the last time there was a sergeant chief, if there ever was.
I think Al Reaver might have been way back.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
quite a while ago. Like I said, we are not adding another person, we're just promoting somebody with it.
You just can't keep up, right?
Getting old.
And problem.
Also trying to get a succession plan in case something was to happen.
Like if you got lost on a cruise.
That,
If you got lost on a cruise.
yeah.
Anything you wanna talk about, new old business?
Nope.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
You're not feeling good virtually. So I was just wondering, I've been talking to a lot of people and they go, you know, they say, you know, are you interested in becoming a member of a new board or a commission? And they say, wow, you know, I'm really thinking about it, but I need to talk with my family. So I'm wondering, since it sounds like the next meeting is going to be pretty filled, and if the life of the world wouldn't come to an end, if there would be any chance that we could put off the board and commission choosing until the new year. We have maybe 3 weeks of newspapers that would be coming out where if we could get some front page stories about what it's like being on a board or a commission and the benefits that would come to the committees and the community. That might be a great reason to delay the boards and commissions and make sure that we have a really balanced representation. Thank you.
Lisa Nickel, West Bluff Drive, registered voter. I am on one of the commissions, the Harbor Commission. And I feel that if you go on the website, the names of the different boards and commission people are there with their chair people. And if anyone has any questions about what it pertains to, how does it work? You know, how many times do you meet, things like that. They could get a hold of any of those people. And our board only meets for the summer months, but a lot of the other ones are meeting and need to keep the business going of what their commission is about. So they really need to be ready to roll in January, not put that off. So I think they've had a long time to get in their applications and make phone calls or emails, reach out, and I think we've had enough time. We need to get it done.
To clarify, we do have, or to add, we do have, I'm not concerned about filling the vacancies. We do have over 26 applicants and we received another one today. So I think we'll have 30 or so applications for 19 positions. So I think if the goal is to wait to get more applicants, I think we're okay. We're actually better off than any year we have been before. And I personally, in my recommendation, I wouldn't recommend veering off from our policy is to appoint members at the end of the year. This is something we've always, just like we do the budget at the end of the year. This is just part of city business.
We'll get it done. We have anything else I want to talk about?
I don't.
Any others have anything they want to bring back up?
Yeah, that's all we have. So.
Oh, yeah. You got anything else? Let's go. Yeah, we'll just adjourn.
Okay.